Igor Eidman is joining our conversation, sociologist and publicist. Friends, I want to immediately encourage you to subscribe to Igor Eidman's YouTube channel, Eidman News. There you'll find fresh analysis every day. Igor, we're glad to see you. Let's start our discussion with this topic. Around Putin's dacha in Valdai, they've deployed as many as 12 air defense systems. Well, you might think, for heaven's sake, there could be 50, 100, as many as Putin wants, but there used to be far fewer. That's what's interesting here. Is Putin becoming more and more worried about his own life?
Yes, of course, he always worries about his life to the maximum. It's just that now, apparently, there are more threats to his life. That is, Ukraine is striking military and strategic targets deep inside Russian territory every day, and accordingly could also strike at Putin's palaces. And of course, he fears for his own skin more than anything else. By the way, I'd like to point out that at the same time as this information came out, there was also news that all of Moscow, yes, the whole city, with probably about 20 million people, including visitors, is protected by just 50 of the same kind. So that means it's only 5 times more than what's used to protect just one of Putin's dachas. In other words, you can imagine it turns out that Putin's security, his security expenses, are roughly equivalent to the expenses for millions of Muscovites. So one Putin equals millions of ordinary people. And of course, this demonstrates his weakness, his cowardice, his vulnerability. Absolutely, that's true. And now we see, for example, Orban, he's crowing about how Russia has clearly won the war, saying they look like a country that has won a war. On the contrary, it looks like a country, and its leadership looks like a cornered animal, hiding somewhere in its den and trying to protect itself by any means, visible or invisible.
All right, let's talk about something else now. Alaska. Actually, Trump just made a fresh post. Let me quote it for our audience. Let me remind you that apparently a meeting between the American and Russian presidents will take place there this Friday, so there will be plenty to discuss. And here's what Trump said most recently. The dishonest media has launched a campaign against my meeting with Putin. They keep quoting bad people, saying that we lost to Putin. But we always win. If I got Moscow or Leningrad for free as part of a deal with Russia, the fake news would say I made a bad deal. Could you please tell me, what do you think of Trump's attitude right now? And, well, what is your view of this meeting as of today? Because, well, it changes every day. One day there's some statement from the Kremlin, then Trump says, we could just walk away, we're not happy with Ukraine. So at this moment, what are your feelings about this meeting? What are you expecting?
I'm not expecting anything at all. I think it will end up with absolutely nothing. It will be an embarrassment for the Americans, yet another embarrassment for Trump. Yes, of course, Trump, he just can't admit any mistake or defeat of his. Of course, he'll say it was a great meeting, or at the very least, he'll say that we're just getting started. Yes, he'll say we'll achieve results soon, but usually his talk is just incoherent rambling. But I don't think there will be any result at all. For now, at least, both sides have stated their positions, and today there was information from the Ukrainian side, Zelensky, and from the Russian side. Russia insists on the surrender of 4 regions and continues to insist. Ukraine naturally has no intention of giving anything up. So I really don't understand how they could possibly come to any agreement. The only results, let's put it this way, the outcome will be negative in any case, because in reality, the president of the world's leading democratic country is receiving a mass murderer, an international terrorist, a bloody dictator. It's not just nonsense, it's like some kind of bad joke. So, but the result was already negative. But how negative it will be after the meeting, we don't know yet. I think the worst case scenario is that Trump might support some of Putin's claims, which Ukraine will reject. And that will give Trump and his circle another reason to stir up a scandal with Ukraine to cut off aid or something like that. Putin will be delighted. That's largely why he's meeting, to make Trump believe that it's Ukraine that's sabotaging his grand peace plan and his chances for the Nobel Prize, not Russia, because Trump naturally only thinks about himself and his own interests, not about peace at all. So now Putin will try to manipulate Trump. And that's not hard to do, because Trump is in very poor mental shape. We hear what he's saying, it's just pure theater of the absurd. All these incredible stories about how Russia could have easily taken the capital city of Kiev in a mere 4 hours, but for some inexplicable reason, the general decided not to utilize the main highway, and instead deliberately led the troops through the vast open farmland, where they subsequently got completely lost in the extensive wheat and towering cornfields. In short, he's spouting some new nonsense, and honestly, I don't think we should expect anything from him at all. But Ukraine is behaving absolutely correctly. It isn't trying to sort things out with him, but is instead trying to show the whole world, including the US, that it is Russia, not Ukraine, that is the obstacle to peace. Ukraine is ready for a ceasefire even tomorrow.
Yeah, that was some epic nonsense. Personally, I was also surprised when Trump said, "What, you didn't know that Ukraine had access to the ocean? About 1,000 kilometers, right?" And I thought, then why were lobsters so expensive in Kyiv? And so on. But nevertheless, I want to ask you why. As The Guardian reports, Trump fired a number of experts who actually specialize in the Russia-Ukraine war and Russian policy in general. Because of this, as journalists note, Trump is as unprepared as possible for this meeting, even in terms of his insider knowledge. Not to mention, I don't know, in terms of speeches or anything like that. So basically, there is almost no one to brief the American president, even on the context. Can you explain how you feel about this, and in general, how should this be assessed?
This absolutely surprised me completely. If he had fired some amateurs and laymen like Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth or some clowns from television from his favorite channel Fox News, I would have been surprised. But the fact that he is firing specialists and intelligent people is completely natural. All of us, we've worked in different organizations. If the boss is a fool, then of course he can't stand having smart people or specialists around him and instead surrounds himself with even more blatant, complete fools. That's Trump's personnel policy.
Right? So if you don't mind, I'd like to discuss two scenarios with you. A positive and a negative one after this meeting, which we might see. Let's start with the positive one. What do you personally see as a possible outcome of this meeting that would not just meet our expectations, but actually surprise you? Because you said you don't have any expectations.
Yes. Let's imagine the most positive scenario. They meet at a military base. Obviously, security measures will be taken there. But this isn't Russia.
Excellent.
And of course, they won't take away the service weapons from all the officers and soldiers there. I don't think that will happen. I think that would be humiliating for the officers. I think they simply won't allow it. This is America, after all, I repeat, not Russia. And what if some officer on that base manages to sneak into the area where Putin will be, where he'll be received, or where negotiations will take place, and empties his revolver or whatever service weapon he has right into Putin's temple? That, in fact, would be the main and only possible positive outcome. I think that not just millions, but hundreds of millions of people around the world would celebrate this. This event would be like a holiday, simply a personal celebration.
And Russia, by the way, in this case, do you think it wouldn't start a nuclear war, as many people fear?
I think that, let's put it this way, in Moscow, many people would celebrate it as well. And even in the Kremlin too, paradoxically enough. And people would celebrate it because Putin, like any dictator, autocrat, and oppressor, especially a dictator who has lost touch with reality and has obvious paranoid complexes, drives the country into war, into crisis, and puts the ruling elite, who are used to living comfortably and without much stress, into a state of constant military tension. Of course, they will be happy to be rid of him. Naturally, not only will they not start any new war, but moreover, I think that literally after, yes, there will be mourning at first, tears, the simple-minded masses will cry, and then these people will, just like after Stalin's death. And today's Beriyas and Khrushchevs, Putin's closest associates, will be rubbing their hands together. And in a couple of months, there will be a denunciation of the Putin cult and a signal to the West that we want to make peace, we want to get out of Ukraine, let's negotiate the terms, because everyone understands perfectly well that there will be a price to pay for all the destruction and terror that has taken place.
Negative scenario. This is a negative scenario. Let's discuss it. This is truly the worst thing that could happen at this meeting.
The negative scenario is that Putin will roll out some supposedly peaceful proposal that is naturally inapplicable to Ukraine. For example, that Ukraine must surrender Donbass. They are ending the war, sort of. And Trump will decide that, well, he doesn't have any advisors. He fired them all himself. He's in dementia. He'll decide that this is a good proposal. Naturally, Ukraine will refuse. Then Trump will decide that Zelensky has no cards to play and he's trying to outplay me. He'll start having a fit, and then all sorts of people like Vance and other sycophants will run up to him and start winding him up. And he'll start putting pressure on Ukraine again. He'll cut off all aid to them, including the aid that's still coming from Biden. Can you imagine? Everyone used to criticize old man Biden. Right now, it's still his aid that's coming through, not Trump's, and so on. Yes, another thing that would be very unpleasant, but I'll say right away it's unlikely, is that he would refuse to sell weapons to Europeans for Ukraine, or if they refuse to share intelligence with Ukraine. That would be very unpleasant.
Well, yes, J.D. Vance already said the other day that America has lost interest in funding the Russian-Ukrainian war, but selling weapons is still very much on the table. Yes, so I completely agree with you. What do you think about the fact that the White House has nominated Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize? Well, it's interesting, you have to admit. He is supported by Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan of Armenia, Ilham Aliyev, the President of Azerbaijan, the Prime Minister of Cambodia, the President of Gabon, the Prime Minister of Israel, the government of Pakistan, and the Foreign Minister of Rwanda. So, in short, well, it's kind of amusing on the one hand, but on the other, how are we supposed to interpret this? Really, maybe he does have such an ambition and we should play along with it. I don't know, let's support him, let's say. Well, give weapons to Ukraine and then you'll get the Nobel Peace Prize. How serious a factor is this right now, one that could actually change the course of history?
The course of history, of course, won't be decided by all this. These are just fleeting situational things. Trump, we have to realize that Trump won't be in Washington for long. This is, of course, a comedy, a Hollywood comedy of the absurd. The Coen brothers, I really think the Coen brothers will definitely make a movie about Trump someday. And of course, there will be that scene where Trump is sitting in his chair and all these lackeys from different countries rush up to him and sing to him. He says, I want the Nobel Prize for Trump, the great peacemaker, immediately. Bring the Nobel Prize right away. And Trump, in his gruff voice, says, I want the Nobel Prize. They all start shouting louder and louder, Nobel Committee, have you no shame? Look, Trump is already crying. He's going to be traumatized. He needs to be calmed down with the Nobel Prize immediately. Then the Nobel Committee will shove the Nobel Prize into his mouth like a pacifier, and he'll calm down. Well, it's all just absurd. What kind of world are we living in? It's absolutely astonishing. Why, in this whole story, of course, there's this, it's not fashionable to quote Pushkin's The Captain's Daughter, but still, there's a plot there where Grinev, I think he's the main character, right? There, Pugachev forces the newly captured Russian soldiers and officials to swear allegiance to him and makes them kiss his hand. And Grinev, the main character, doesn't want to do it. And there's some kind old grandmother. She says, oh, it's all right, just kiss the villain's, the great Tsar's, or whatever he called himself, hand. So here, theoretically, you could do the same, right? But what, are you supposed to kiss the villain's hand? The main thing is that there should be a purpose, that he really gives you weapons and so on. But even in this case, it's still not beneficial for Ukraine. Why? Because if Ukraine starts calling Trump a great peacemaker, she'll completely lose her mind, and he'll decide that Ukraine is satisfied with his actions on the international stage. Well, if Ukraine itself is satisfied, then of course it's possible to keep going down the path of some rotten negotiations and shady deals with Putin.
Let's discuss one more thing, Igor, before we wrap up, if you don't mind. It seems like China has woken up a little. Actually, they kept silent about the meeting between Putin and Trump in Alaska for quite a while, and then they made a statement that all interested parties should participate in negotiations on Ukraine. This is what the Chinese government reported. China considers itself a directly interested party. Maybe, I don't know, they're offended that they weren't invited to Alaska. Could you tell us about this, please? Or how should we interpret this? Just to clarify, this was stated by Foreign Ministry spokesperson Lin Jian during a press conference. So that's the story.
I think that China is a bit offended. It's unpleasant for them that, just like Europe, they've essentially been excluded from these negotiations. Why is that? Because China considers itself a great power and believes that no serious negotiations or major political processes in the world should take place without China. That's the first thing. And secondly, I think China is also offended by Russia because Russia is its creation, and China has long regarded Russia essentially as its vassal. And the fact that Putin is independently scheming with China's enemy is perceived as if he's cheating, like he's having an affair with Trump, stepping out on his legitimate partner Xi Jinping. I think the Chinese leadership doesn't really like that either. But in reality, just like Europe, China is currently excluded from this process. But if without Europe it really is impossible to reach any agreements, like for example lifting sanctions against Russia, then negotiating without Europe is pointless, because the most important sanctions are actually European, due to the closer economic and traditional ties between Russia and Europe. As for China, I think it's unlikely that it will play a significant role in these negotiations. Unless perhaps at some point the US or Europe manage to motivate China to put some pressure on Putin so that he leans toward more reasonable options for ending the war, like freezing the conflict, rather than the positions he is currently stubbornly defending with almost manic persistence, which clearly will not lead to any kind of peace or even a truce.
We'll keep watching the developments and discuss them with you again next week. Many thanks to Igor Eidman, sociologist and publicist, who was on the air with Ukraine today. Friends, subscribing to Igor Eidman's channel is always encouraged. Eidman News, fresh analysis comes out every day, and we're leaving the link in the description. Igor, all the best. Goodbye. Thank you.
All the best. All the best. Goodbye. Goodbye.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.